Hello, everyone. I'm Carolyn Choate, and I am joined today by my new friend Erik, who is an author who was inspired to create a bundle of courses about how to self-publish. And I am so thrilled to have him here because I have been self-publishing for years and I don't want to teach people how to do it. So, welcome.
Thank you, Carolyn. It's great to be here. I love what you're doing. You've got so many great things going on.
Oh, thank you. Why don't you start by telling us about your background and how you got into writing and publishing?
Okay, so I've always loved writing, even though I was a horrible student growing up. I missed a, I was all excited. I always failed the spelling tests. Like we had 10 words that the teacher would say and or sentences that we had to write out. And one day I decided I'm going to study, I'm going to get an A on this thing. So I studied really hard, and sadly, I got all of the spelling words right. But since I misspelled of, spelling it OV in the sentence, she didn't give me 100%, and I was devastated. And that kind of continued. I was a pretty C student, but I loved writing anyway. And I started writing these stories when I was young, these true things that would happen. And then in my 40s, I dug out some of these old things I had written starting when I was around 18 years old. And most of them were half finished because I'd start writing and I'd move on to the next thing. Some of them were finished. And I polished the finished ones. And then I'm like, you know what? I'm going to finish the other ones. And Carolyn, as soon as I started going back to these memories of episodes in my life, of things that I did, it would come back so crystally clear. The writing process was just wonderful. But I was writing just for fun with no agenda at all other than to get these things out. And then I showed them to a few friends and they're like, oh my gosh, you need to turn this into a book. So I took their advice. I decided that maybe why not? At this point, I had 22 true first-person narratives completed. Sent it to a book agent friend, and he looked at it and he said, Erik, you and all your friends are going to love this. And I said, that's not a compliment, is it?
Yeah.
And he said, no, it's all about you. So I don't know if you know the book by Emily Esfahani Smith called The Power of Meaning. I spent a year reworking my book, reworking these narratives, how did I see meaning in my life? Living with the Wayana in the Amazon, deep in the Amazon, I stayed in the Amazon for 6 months. How did I get a sense of belonging from them? Seeing the Aurora Borealis in Alaska, how did that transcendental moment give me something special in my life? Purpose, how did I get purpose in my life from doing these things? And so I reworked it to make it reader focused rather than me focused. Published it, self-published it on Amazon, and that book went gangbusters. That book is called Ordinary to Extraordinary, and came out in 2018. And then
Okay,
that led
so
to
let me interrupt you there for a moment.
yeah.
You had originally shown the manuscript to an agent. What made you decide that you wanted to do the self-publishing?
Two reasons. The first one was at that point, this is in 2000, I was starting to work on it in 2017, the publishing process. At that point, it was still the kind of like gatekeepers of the big publishing industry who, for better or worse, decide, what word is valuable and what word isn't valuable. And usually the words they think were valuable are words exactly like the words they like, which are different from a lot of the words that people in the average population like. It was becoming more accessible. That was the turning point where I think way early on in the early teens, 2012, 14, self-publishing still had a stigma that people write this piece of junk thing and slap it out there, and I'm a published author. About that time in 2018 is when self-publishing people were realizing there are some really high quality books that are being self-published.
That's when it was like rebranded into indie
exactly
publishing.
Right. And that was a big deal. And so I kind of hit right at the start of that point. And so I went
and it looks like you got a professional cover done, because that's a beautiful
oh my
cover.
gosh, I still think there are a lot of bad books out there. Don't get me wrong. Self-publishing doesn't mean, like I said, write a piece of junk, don't have it edited and throw it out there. I spent thousands of dollars on editing. I spent hundreds of dollars on cover design and interior formatting, and so I did it right. I had all of the right people who know how to do things correctly help me through it, and it ended up to do great. And so that single book, Ordinary to Extraordinary, led to one public speaking request, then a second one, then a third one, so much so. And so this is, around 2018 to 20. And I was vice president of international business development for a company. And finally, I decided this speaking is going so well, I can do this full time. I left my position to speak full time, and it went great for exactly 2 months. And the reason is that was January 2020. So in March 2020, 2 months later, everything disappeared. My whole schedule, every cent I had lined up coming in for 2020 disappeared in an instant. I'd already left my job. My wife wasn't working. And so I thought, okay, my second book was 99% done, sitting on a shelf for 2 years because I was so busy. I just didn't get to it. Got that out, and it did well. And then I thought, I have a third book in my mind and I want to publish it, but it's going to take me 2 years to write it. And I started doing co-authored book projects. And that's where the first one was called The Successful Mind, Tools to Having a Purposeful, Productive, and Happy Life. And I got 33 authors to help me with that. And that book is a million times better than if I would have written it myself, because I had medical doctors, yoga instructors, pastoral counselors, psychologists, all these great people give their idea about what is a purposeful, productive, and happy life. And that book is now in 2 university classrooms. It's Jarir Bookstore bought the Arabic language rights, and they're selling it in the Middle East. And so that started my kind of journey doing some co-authored book projects. And it's been just a wonderful ride since then.
How did you learn how to do these things? How did you learn how to get your book into a university classroom, or how to distribute it?
So the best part, I told you my first book did great because I did a book launch, and it was just kind of like a fly by the seat of my pants book launch, trying to figure things out as I was going. I had some great advice as well, though, but then, and it did well, when I did this next book, the fact that I had 33 co-authors that all had pretty big followings from around the world. I mean, South Africa, India, UK, Canada, other parts of Europe, that they all promoted that this book was coming out. So that kind of just got into the algorithms of Amazon, and they're like, whoa, something's happening with this book. And then suddenly Amazon's showing it to people we don't know, and it just kind of went crazy from there. The university classroom, it's because one of the authors, somebody knew that person already. They weren't an author at that point, and so they decided it made sense for their classroom. And then for Jarir Bookstore, I just got an email out of the blue one day saying, Erik, Jarir Bookstore's interested in 3 of they did 3 of my books, actually. And I say my books, the co-authored books that I produced. And they said, we're interested in 3 books. If you would like to send watermarked copies of your manuscript, we'll give a review. And so I just sent it over, and 6 months later, maybe even 9, so out of the blue, I get an email saying, we're interested in your books, and here's an offer. And we negotiated a little bit, and in the end, they bought the Arabic language rights for 5 years.
Wow. Awesome.
And again, that's, I think, Carolyn, of producing something of quality, people will find it. It doesn't mean you just stick it out there and everybody finds it. But if you have something of quality and it was on the websites, the authors were promoting it and things like that, that helps a ton.
Yeah.
As you know, because that's your space.
Yeah, that's exactly it. My books have been selling since 2009, and I hardly do any promotion anymore because it's gotten that, SEO, and it's just baked into the systems in the internet, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So now you have come out with a bundle of courses, 3 courses about writing a book, self-publishing a book, launching a book. What inspired you to turn your knowledge into a course?
Oh, I love this question because a bunch of people have just popped into my head, and they're people who never thought they could write a book. They saw what I was doing, and I helped them through the process. The first one that comes to mind is a guy named David Brownlee. David Brownlee, he is a really high-level public speaker, hundreds of thousands of dollars in public speaking per year. And so David traditionally published his first book, and then with the same publisher as Brendan Burchard and Tony Robbins, actually. And then he saw what was happening with my books, and he's like, dude, how do you do this? Because I did this and it's, this is my result and it's fine, but I want to do more. So I helped him actually, and I call it independently published because we have a publisher imprint name and everything like that. So if somebody goes to Barnes & Noble, picks this book up, there's nothing on that book to show them that it's a quote self-published book. On Amazon, there's nothing on there to show that it's a self-published book. So I kind of call it, like you said, independently published book. And his book did great. But the first name that came to my head is a woman who, she was first one of my co-authors, and then she became a published author, which is great. And then she said, hey, can you help me? I'm writing my own book. Can you help me publish it? So I did. And when her solo book came out, she literally said to me, when I was 9 years old, I told my teacher in grade school I wanted to become a writer. And my teacher said, oh, writing is really difficult. She spent 30 years not writing because her teacher told her writing is difficult. And then she became a lawyer. She's going through her life. And then all of a sudden she decided, I'm going to do it anyway. Who cares if writing is difficult? Helped her through the process. She got her book published. And she said, with tears in her eyes, she said, I've been dreaming of this since I was 9 years old. And she's probably, I don't know for sure, 40 years old at the time. And so that joy that she had of getting her book published was so wonderful. And I've seen that over and over and over again. For different reasons, people have this goal of publishing a book. And some of them, it's a real desire. So I started helping people one-on-one to do this process. Then I realized I can't do much more of that because it's just me. I'm literally working one-on-one with them on the different stages. So I thought, well, what if I actually recorded myself going through the process, wrote PDF files for the process. And so I created the first course, and it's a bundle of 3 courses in one. The first course is idea to completed manuscript. The second course is from manuscript to published book. And the third one is a really short one of just basically the strategy for the book launch. But I don't go beyond that. Like that's where you work, where you get people into a funnel to keep sustaining the book sales. So I can get them through the book launch, but then they need somebody like you to actually keep the sales going. But those are the 3 parts of the course. And so it's been so wonderful now to see people go through it. And I have live Q&A every Wednesday, 9 a.m. Pacific time on Zoom, where people can ask me live questions about what's happening with them in the course. And it's just great, Carolyn, to be able to scale. And I still get the emails from authors saying, oh my gosh, I did it. This is, and they tell me about their book launch and things. So
I particularly love the middle one. There's so much detail. Like it goes on to a second page of like, how to format, how to upload to Amazon, how to upload to Ingram Spark, which is so important and often neglected. The amount of detail in there is wonderful.
Yeah, for sure. That's the one where it's things you don't have to be smart, but you can't publish a book unless you know. Self-publishing, because there are things that are going to be asked of you while you're uploading that you either know or you don't know. And you could spend 10 hours researching every one of these little tiny things and you could figure it out yourself. However, that's going to be a long process. And whereas this one, it just tells you why and what the answer is and why. Super quick. But yeah, that second one is where the kind of the technical part comes in, and I try and make it as easy as possible.
Yes. So I am going to have a link to the course in the description and show notes. I do have a coupon code as well, so I'll give you all the details down there. Is there anything else that you would like for my audience to know about the course?
I'm going to talk about writing in general just briefly.
Okay.
There are a few things I've noticed that stop people from getting their book done. The first one is, as soon as they're great writers often, and as soon as they think of they're writing a book, they think every word has to be perfect because it's a book that's going to last forever. And they freeze and they can't write anymore. So just take a deep breath and say, you know what? I'm just going to write it and then figure out the tweaking later. And also people think, again, all the grammar, things like that, they edit while they go. I don't know anybody who's gotten past chapter 2 editing while they go because it's so laborious to go over and over. That's why we have professional editors. So just write it. maybe go through it once or twice, 3 times for yourself, and then have a professional look at it, because that is the safety net, that you don't have to be a great, great, great writer to have a great, great, great book. And then just start. So many people think about it and they don't start. So those are the main things. And I talk a little bit about that in the first course. The first course is something that somebody can do on their own, but it just gives guidance on how the stumbling blocks that people fall through. The second one, like I said, it just makes the whole process easy. So it's been wonderful to see people get to success by kind of like eliminating the mystery of publishing.
Yes. Excellent. Thank you so much for coming and spending this time with me and for sharing your wonderful work with me and my audience. So I really appreciate you being here.
Great to be here. Thank you very much.